What if the very pipeline that could have ended America's energy worries was instead buried deep beneath political chaos, only to be dragged back into the spotlight years later? Imagine a colossal artery stretching from Canada's frozen tar sands all the way down to the refineries in the United States, nearly forgotten but still whispering promises of energy independence. The Keystone XL pipeline was once hailed as a game-changer, destined to flood American markets with Canadian oil. But stalled permits, soaring tariffs, and fierce opposition nearly buried it forever. Now, with oil reserves dwindling across the states, one former leader is throwing down the gauntlet, eager to resurrect this giant project. Could a second term ignite this oil revival? Or are hidden contradictions too deep to overcome? Just a quick recap: expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline is finally delivering oil after massive delays and exploding costs. The federal government grabbed it in 2018, trying to wrestle control of energy flows. Now, President Trump wants to jumpstart Keystone XL's comeback, promising to cut through red tape with ease. But the pipeline isn't just about crude oil, it's a symbol of clashing policies, trade tariffs, and complex relationships between the US and Canada. The Keystone XL pipeline, initially a $9 billion vision back in 2008, promised to carry 830,000 barrels of heavy, tar-laden oil daily from Canada's western tar sands to refineries in America. It was supposed to be a lifeline, tapping into one of the planet's largest oil reserves to fuel U.S. demands. Yet, this giant project was halted in 2021 when the then-owner, TC Energy, pulled out after a key U.S. permit was cancelled by President Biden on his very first day in office. Now, President Trump is making waves again, urging vitality back into the project with promises of near-instant approvals. His message: Keystone XL must be built. Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, jumped in immediately, blasting the prior cancellation as a blunder and touting lower fuel costs for American families as a huge victory waiting to happen. But the road back is tangled. The company once championing the pipeline, Southbow Corporation, which separated from TC Energy yet also pursued Keystone XL for years, has flatly refused to revive efforts. Parts of the old pipeline route through Alberta, Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska already lie dismantled, and crucial permits have lapsed. Southbow's statement remains cautious: "We continue to explore options to increase Canadian oil supply to meet America's growing demand." Meanwhile, Trump reversed Biden's cancellation of the 2019 permit, technically reopening the door. Yet, a looming threat shadows this revival: new tariffs targeting Canadian oil imports, including a 10% crude oil tax, designed to pressure Canada in trade talks. These tariffs have been delayed a few times but remain a ticking clock. Adding to the head-scratching contradictions, Trump has emphasized that America should rely primarily on its own oil and gas resources, minimizing dependence on neighbors. Yet, he pushes for this Canadian pipeline while slapping tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports, citing immigration and drug trafficking as key reasons. Canada took steps to curb illegal fentanyl, deploying measures to satisfy U.S. demands, while Mexico stationed thousands of National Guard troops at the border to address concerns. But there's more complexity lurking. The U.S. plans to introduce new tariffs based on what other countries impose in subsidies, taxes, and regulatory barriers. The tit-for-tat tariffs could soon spark a wider trade war, threatening economic growth on both sides of the border. Experts, however, aren't convinced about the pipeline's imminent rebirth. Richard Masson, a policy expert from Calgary, points out the glaring contradiction: it makes no sense to tariff oil shipments heavily, yet push for a pipeline to build at the same time. He suggests that Trump's Keystone XL talk may be more political theater than a practical plan, aimed at pleasing energy sector supporters. Canadian officials remain cautiously optimistic. The Canadian government says it's open to meaningful discussions about the pipeline's future. They stress that Canada has always been a trustworthy energy partner for the U.S., but unfair tariffs and sovereignty issues threaten cooperation. In Canada, all necessary permits are valid, and the infrastructure north of the border remains intact. The missing ingredient: a private company willing to pick up the shattered pieces and restart construction. So far, no one has stepped forward. The question remains: why would any company risk billions to resurrect a project two U.S. presidents have already nixed? Without ironclad guarantees and long-term oil supply contracts, the proposition looks like a gamble few want to take. Canadian producers need assurance that market access will hold for decades before committing to massive oil sands expansions. Let's dive deeper into what Keystone XL really is, and why it has stirred such fierce debate. Stretching nearly 1,900 kilometers, the pipeline would run from Hardisty, Alberta, to Cushing, Oklahoma, and onward to Gulf Coast refineries. Originally proposed under the Obama administration, it was rejected on environmental grounds, only to be revived by Trump and then cancelled again by Biden. The pipeline's primary purpose was to transport some of the dirtiest fossil fuel on Earth, tar sands oil, from Canada's boreal forest, boasting reserves of 168 billion barrels, to refineries ready to process 830,000 barrels per day. Interestingly, much of this oil wasn't intended for American roads. Refined products were slated primarily for export overseas, not local gas stations. Behind the scenes, the pipeline consisted of two parts. The southern leg, now known as the Gulf Coast Pipeline, runs from Cushing, Oklahoma, to Port Arthur, Texas, and was completed quietly. But the northern leg, about 1,290 kilometers through Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska, sparked heated controversy. The U.S. State Department denied permits during the Obama years, granted them under Trump, then revoked them again under Biden. Environmental critics warned that the pipeline would not bring down fuel prices as claimed. In fact, reviews concluded the opposite, that the project wouldn't lower gasoline prices in America at all. Furthermore, much of the oil shipped through Keystone XL would bypass U.S. markets entirely, destined for international buyers. This fits a growing trend. The United States has emerged as a global oil and gas exporter, more than doubling exports over the past decade to around 10.7 million barrels daily. But what about risks? Tar sands oil is thick, acidic, and more corrosive than conventional crude. Pipelines carrying this substance have shown an alarming track record, spilling oil at 3 times the rate per mile compared to other U.S. pipelines in the Midwest. This raises serious environmental concerns about leaks, contamination, and damage to fragile ecosystems. As this tangled saga unfolds, the future of Keystone XL hangs in the balance. Will the lure of energy security, economic benefits, and political promises breathe new life into this embattled pipeline? Or will tariffs, environmental concerns, and corporate skepticism doom it to the shadows once more? The answers lie beneath layers of politics, economics, and the ever-shifting landscape of North American energy. What happens next could reshape energy ties between two neighboring giants forever. The Keystone XL pipeline was once poised to transform energy trade between Canada and the United States, promising to carry hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil daily from the Canadian tar sands to American refineries. But the ambitious project faced a monumental setback in 2021 when the Biden administration abruptly canceled a crucial permit, halting construction and throwing its future into doubt. Now, former President Trump has stepped back into the spotlight, urging the companies involved to revive the pipeline with promises of swift approvals. Yet the reality is far thornier. Despite Trump's calls, the main company behind Keystone XL, Southbow Corporation, born from a split with TC Energy after years of chasing this elusive pipeline, has flatly refused to resurrect the project. Much of the pipeline's infrastructure, stretching through Alberta, Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska, has already been dismantled. Key permits have expired, leaving nothing but a skeleton of what could have been. Southbow remains focused on alternative ways to meet America's rising appetite for oil, signaling that resurrecting Keystone XL is not on their agenda. Trump has already overturned the executive order that canceled Keystone XL's 2019 permit, theoretically clearing the way for the project's revival. But looming over all this are fresh tariffs threatening Canadian oil exports, including a steep 10% tax on crude. Though these tariffs were postponed until March to allow for border security talks with Canada, their shadow casts deep uncertainty over future cross-border energy trade. How can Canadian producers commit to pipelines when new taxes could strangle profitability? At the same time, the administration's conflicting stance on energy only adds layers of confusion. Trump insists that the U.S. can stand alone with its own oil and gas reserves. Yet simultaneously, he threatens hefty tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, sparking fears of a brewing trade war. His recent announcement promised tariff hikes on Canadian and Mexican goods as leverage to force tougher action against illegal immigration and the trafficking of deadly opioids like fentanyl. While only a small portion of fentanyl crosses from Canada, the pressure on America's neighbors is relentless. Canada, for its part, has responded by tightening border security and vowing to clamp down harder on these illicit flows. Mexico has mobilized thousands of National Guard troops to patrol the U.S. border. But the repercussions of these tariffs and tensions don't stop at immigration enforcement. They threaten to undermine vital trade relationships, jeopardizing economic growth as retaliatory tariffs loom from Canada, Mexico, and Europe. The entire saga raises pressing questions. Can the once promising Keystone XL project be reborn amidst such chaos? Will the conflicting energy and trade policies unravel North American cooperation at a critical moment? Or will these clashing ambitions ignite a geopolitical conflict with consequences far beyond pipelines and tariffs? The stage is set. On one side, a vision of energy independence and bolder oil ambitions; on the other, the cold reality of broken permits, harsher tariffs, and splintering alliances. In the air hangs the sharp scent of uncertainty, like oil seeping slowly into the ground, staining everything in its path. What will it take for this pipeline controversy to finally find resolution or plunge deeper into gridlock? The answer lies just beyond the horizon. Previously, we explored how Canada tackled drug trafficking concerns, reassuring the United States with new measures, while Mexico deployed thousands of National Guard troops along the border. Yet, tensions simmer beneath the surface as trade conflicts loom large. Now, imagine a looming storm growing stronger on the horizon, a wave of new tariffs set to rise this spring. These tariffs will match or even surpass those slapped on American imports by other nations. Think of it, taxes not only on goods but hidden in subsidies, tangled in regulatory hoops, and buried inside value-added taxes, those sneaky charges familiar in Europe. The threat of retaliatory tariffs from Canada, Mexico, and Europe could ignite a full-scale trade war, pulling the economy into turmoil. Growth could be strangled, and markets shaken. Enter Richard Masson, an expert from the University of Calgary's School of Public Policy, who shines a spotlight on an odd contradiction. On one hand, the ambition to revive the Keystone XL pipeline, a colossal project promising to fuel energy demands. But on the other, imposing tariffs on allies like Canada does not gel with efforts to boost domestic oil production. How can the United States penalize its neighbors' products, yet expect someone eager to build this pipeline? It sounds like a political balancing act, a play to rally supporters hungry for oil development projects, rather than a coherent energy strategy. Meanwhile, Canada expresses cautious openness. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson's spokesperson shared that Canada is willing to discuss moving the Keystone XL forward. After all, Canada has proven itself a reliable energy supplier to the United States for decades. But there's a fierce warning: unfair tariffs and threats to sovereignty are like poison, they erode trust and weaken the desire for partnership. The Canadian spokesperson insists the project north of the border still holds all required permits. The pieces are in place. All that remains is for a private company to bravely step forward and push the pipeline to life again. But so far, no one has dared to claim the mantle. Masson doesn't hide his skepticism. Who would risk investing billions in a project twice cancelled by U.S. presidents? Financing an oil sands expansion demands not just massive capital, but confidence that the market will stay open and stable for decades. No company wants to swallow that bitter pill without solid guarantees, preferably backed by the U.S. government. And with so much uncertainty swirling, tariffs, political swings, environmental battles, it's hard to see that happening anytime soon. But here's the real question: can the dream of Keystone XL survive this tangled web of politics, economics, and diplomacy? Or is it destined to remain a ghost on the map, a pipeline that forever haunts energy debates but never flows oil again? Stay with me, because the real drama is just beginning. What if the next twist in this saga isn't in boardrooms or government halls, but somewhere no one expects? In a battle over energy and the environment, the fate of the Keystone XL pipeline hangs in the balance. Will it rise from the ashes, or is it doomed to linger in political limbo? This project, previously cancelled by 2 U.S. presidents, promised to transform North America's energy landscape. But even now, uncertainty clouds its revival. Can it really happen? Can Canadian oil find a way to flow into the United States amidst tariffs and political standoffs? Over the years, Canada has dreamed of becoming an energy power. Yet experts like Richard Masson argue that no company would risk investment in a project already shelved by leaders on both sides of the border. Why would anyone take on Keystone XL unless guaranteed a safety net from Washington? Currently, the pipeline's revival seems unlikely amidst dwindling oil production and a labyrinth of uncertainties. The Keystone XL is no ordinary pipeline. Stretching an impressive 1,900 kilometers, it would connect Hardisty, Alberta, to major U.S. oil storage in Cushing, Oklahoma. Initially proposed during the Obama regime in 2008, it promised vast amounts of Alberta's tar sands oil, 830,000 barrels daily, flowing toward Gulf Coast refineries. Yet environmental concerns led to its cancellation, only for it to see a brief revival under Trump before being halted again by Biden on his first day in office. But that's not the end of the story. The original design aimed to significantly boost the capacity for processing the 168 billion barrels of crude buried beneath Canadian forests. As the timeline of Keystone's tumultuous history unfolds, what will the next chapter bring? With interests from both governments and companies in play, the stakes have never been higher. The first segment of Keystone XL, a southern leg, is already operational. But before us lies the more contentious northern stretch, extending through Montana and South Dakota to Nebraska, which has yet to receive approval. And here's the twist: despite the lobbying efforts claiming these pipelines would secure America's energy future and lower fuel prices, numerous investigations have shown that most of the oil would head overseas. So, what's really in store for the U.S. and Canadian energy sectors? With pressure mounting from economic uncertainty and the threat of tariffs looming, can a deal be struck that satisfies all parties? Enthusiasm for Keystone XL may be ebbing even as the demand for energy continues to rise. The question lingers: can a project designed to secure energy supply really thrive in such contentious waters? As we delve deeper, the story unfurls, revealing the complexities and conflicts rooted in this energy saga. Each turn brings us closer to the heart of the struggle. Who will benefit from Keystone XL if it ever sees the light of day again? What will the future hold for North America's energy independence? The battle lines are drawn, and the outcome remains uncertain. Are we on the brink of a new era in energy, or will this be just another chapter lost to history? Previously, we saw how the Keystone XL project's southern segment, now called the Gulf Coast Pipeline, was completed and carries oil from Cushing, Oklahoma, down to Port Arthur, Texas. Opponents say the company behind it, TC Energy, sidestepped proper scrutiny. They used a broad nationwide permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, dodging the more detailed, stricter approval process usually required for such projects. But the more controversial part, the northern leg, remained untouched, sparking decades of fierce debate. Imagine a giant pipeline slicing through the wilderness from Hardisty, Alberta, across Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska, down nearly 1,300 miles. This northern leg was meant to connect Canada's oil-rich tar sands directly with America's heartland refineries. Yet, in 2015, under President Barack Obama, the U.S. State Department dealt a huge blow by refusing a permit required to build, maintain, and operate this stretch across the border. It was a crushing defeat for TC Energy. Fast forward, Donald Trump revived the hope by reinstating that permit, but then President Joe Biden dashed it again within his first days in office. A relentless pendulum swinging with every administration, leaving this project in limbo. What makes this pipeline so important and so controversial? Lobbyists for the oil industry argued that developing the tar sands wouldn't just fuel America's energy needs, it would enhance national security and bring down gas prices. But objective reviews from both Obama's and Trump's administrations found otherwise. The Keystone XL would not reduce U.S. gasoline costs. Why? Because most of that heavy crude wouldn't feed American gas stations. Instead, the refined oil would be shipped overseas, riding the wave of a recent 2015 policy shift that lifted the ban on crude oil exports. And here's a staggering fact: the United States now exports roughly 10.7 million barrels of crude oil and refined products every single day. That's more than double what it was 10 years ago, making America a leading global oil exporter. The Keystone XL pipeline would have simply added fuel to this growing export fire. But the story darkens with environmental concerns. The oil from Canada's tar sands isn't like the usual crude, it's thicker, acidic, and far more corrosive. This makes pipelines carrying it far more vulnerable to leaks and spills. Between 2007 and 2010 alone, pipelines transporting this tar-like crude in Midwestern states spilled 3 times as much per mile compared to the national average. One particularly vivid memory haunts the region. In North Dakota, a pipeline ruptured and shot a geyser of 21,000 gallons of sticky tar sands crude into the air, spewing a thick, suffocating stench into the landscape. The ground soaked in toxic sludge, choked under the weight of pollution. This environmental risk weighed heavily on public opinion and government decisions. Could such a project ever truly be safe? Could America afford the price in both money and nature? As political leaders swap promises from one side to another, the question remains, can the Keystone XL pipeline ever rise from these ashes? Will economic interests finally overpower environmental justice? Or will the scars from past spills and broken trust keep this pipeline buried in controversy? Next, we will delve deeper into the tangled economic and political battlefield surrounding Keystone XL's revival attempts. Is there a genuine chance to rebuild, or is this just another political stunt? What does the future hold for energy security on this continent? The answers lie just beyond the horizon, but one thing is clear, this pipeline story is far from over. Imagine a world where Canada's vast oil reserves could quench America's insatiable thirst for energy. The dream of the Keystone XL pipeline, connecting Canada's tar sands to U.S. refineries, promised to transform the energy landscape. Yet, this ambitious project has faced delays stretching on for years, and costs spiraling into the tens of billions. As oil begins to flow through the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, the spotlight turns to the potential rebirth of the Keystone XL under President Trump's administration. Could this be the answer to America's energy crisis? The Keystone XL pipeline was not just a series of steel tubes, it symbolized a shot at energy independence. Imagining it meant visualizing 1,900 kilometers of pipeline winding from Hardisty, Alberta, to a bustling crude oil storage hub in Cushing, Oklahoma, and onward to Gulf Coast refineries. It had been designed to transport 830,000 barrels of oil daily, a flow of black gold that many believed could fulfill the U.S. energy needs for years to come. However, the dream came crashing down when environmental concerns led to its suspension. Environmentalists, indigenous communities, and local farmers rallied against it, citing severe risks to vital ecosystems. The pipeline would slice through sensitive land, crossing hundreds of rivers and the crucial Ogallala Aquifer, which provides drinking water to millions. The stakes were high, and the fears palpable. But as Trump expresses his desire to revive the project, questions loom. Will he eliminate the tariffs that create a barrier to this partnership? Canada has long been reliable in energy supplies, but recent trade policies have complicated the relationship. With high tariffs on exports and a wavering commitment from producers, the outlook remains muddled. Would dropping tariffs be a prerequisite for the revival? Or could it risk pushing Canada to look elsewhere for markets? Trump's administration has already made bold moves by revoking restrictions set by his predecessor, but will that be enough? Companies like TC Energy, who once championed the project, are now retreating in uncertainty. They claim the risks and costs are too great to navigate without guarantees from the U.S. government. Further complicating the situation is the issue of environmental risks. The tar sands oil is notoriously thick, acidic, and corrosive, leading to a higher likelihood of leaks. An alarming study revealed that from 2007 to 2010, pipelines carrying this type of oil experienced spills 3 times more frequently than the national average. With a history of significant leaks, critics are not unfounded in their fears. In North Dakota, one unfortunate incident ejected more than 21,000 gallons of tar sands oil into the atmosphere. In another case, over 378,000 gallons spilled into the land. This oil is not just messy, it's difficult to clean, sinking rapidly in waterways and posing devastating threats to wildlife and ecosystems. This isn't merely about oil, it embodies a much deeper conflict. Indigenous rights, environmental protection, and energy independence intertwine in a complex web of interests. Will America choose to chase profits at the potential expense of nature and communities dependent on vital resources? As the chorus for revitalizing the Keystone XL grows loud, the stakes come into sharper focus. Can we trust that this controversial pipeline will bring prosperity without harm? And if it fails, who will pay the price? Each twist in this saga comes with its own set of consequences. What will be the next chapter in this unfolding drama? As we explore, we discover the deeper implications for the environment, energy economy, and international relations. The answers may surprise and challenge the very fabric of our energy story. What if the black gold buried beneath the Canadian forest is more curse than cure? The tar sand mines carve scars into pristine wilderness, leaving toxic pools that stain the soil. Indigenous villages watch their rivers darken, while thick, black oil is refined into piles of petroleum coke, a coal-like waste that clings to the air. Emissions rise 3 to 4 times higher than those of light crude, choking the sky with a sour, metallic smell. Communities nearby breathe in chemicals that taste of rust, and wildlife disappears from water once crystal clear. The cost of every barrel seems to be measured in lost lands and shattered health. But can the promise of endless energy ever outweigh that haunting scent of burning oil? Can a pipeline forged from broken promises survive the storm of public outrage? Since its first proposal, the Keystone XL route has drawn relentless opposition. Environmental activists, indigenous leaders, farmers, and clergy have all stood shoulder to shoulder, chanting for the planet's future. In August 2011, a historic act of civil disobedience unfolded outside the Capitol, resulting in more than 1,200 arrests. "This is not a pipeline to America," declared a late civil rights icon as he was led away, his voice echoing over the crowds. The Dalai Lama, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, former President Jimmy Carter, and top scientists have all condemned the plan, warning of poisoned waters and poisoned hearts. During a 30-day comment window in 2014, over 2 million voices begged the State Department to reject the project. Yet the fossil fuel lobby answered with a cascade of money. $721 million poured into congressional allies in the 2 years before the 2014 midterms. When pro-industry lawmakers seized both houses in early 2015, they rushed a bill to fast-track approval, only to see it dissolve under public pressure. Years later, the same industry funded the 2017 inauguration of a new president, who then breathed life back into the dormant dream. Within days, the administration promised swift regulatory greenlights, while a private firm declared its withdrawal, leaving the route half-built and the permits expired. Meanwhile, the president announced new tariffs on Canadian crude, a 10% levy postponed to March, promising to hit other goods with even harsher duties. The question hangs heavy in the air: will the revived Keystone XL become the lifeline its backers claim, or will it crumble under the weight of environmental fury and political brinkmanship? The next move could reshape the continent's energy future. Will the looming tariffs finally force Canada to turn its oil away, or will a new private champion step forward and finish what was started? The answer awaits beyond the horizon.